Hi guys, I'm a long-time fan and positive activist for MicroProse. I'm also an avid fan of naval combat sims, so whilst I'm always eager to review any new title, I was especially excited for 𝐶 Naval Combat in the Missile Age, to give it its full title. But here's the thing. At about £40, give or take a couple of quid, it's quite the investment, and as yet I haven't seen an honest review of the game in its current state. My allegiance is always to you, the buyer, but I'm also certain that the devs will appreciate some critical feedback too. So here it is, along with some gameplay from a single mission that I played yesterday. 𝐶 is a realistic, high-level, single-player only simulation that is set in the Cold War era. It demonstrates extensive focus on weapons, accurate era detection technology systems, and it is backed up with some excellent modelling, some nice animations, and some great explosions. And honestly, it can be extremely enjoyable to play. At the start, there are numerous levels of difficulty for you to choose from. I only ever play on the hardest and most realistic settings, which can be, and often is, brutal. I found the audio to be adequate, but I think it could be a lot better. And the game, which is in early access right now, currently lacks a campaign, which is due to arrive in Q2 2025. But it does include numerous scenarios and a scenario editor to keep you playing. I believe that modding is also currently active, so that could add even more scenarios and even ships, subs and aircraft for you to play with, but I haven't really looked into that side of things yet. I call 𝐶 a high-level sim because it lacks many of the individual components required for you to be the captain of a single ship, aircraft or submarine in any kind of meaningful way that would allow you to have a realistic and an immersive experience. It simply isn't designed like that. It's not that kind of game. Instead, you are going to be in constant control of all the ships, submarines and aircraft under your command, and as such, things can get busy, confusing and at times quite stressful. To help you manage such a vast force, you can create formations, edit their layout, adjust them, disband them, grow them, shrink them, and just about anything you can think of you can do to them. But most importantly, you can issue commands directly to a formation or each of the individual craft within a formation. You can also adjust headings, or with the shift button held down, you can create a long and detailed route for your formation to follow. If it is a formation of aircraft, then you can also adjust the altitude as well as their speed. Same goes for submarines and their depth. And all units have a radio status and a weapon status. So the trick to this game is to be able to detect enemy units first without first being detected, and to know which weapons best suit the situation, and then also how to implement them effectively. It can be a complex, multifaceted learning curve, as each weapon system has integrated requirements and limitations, and understanding them is essential to using them effectively. Not to mention that every ship, aircraft and submarines have their own integrated requirements and limitations that you will need to take into consideration too. Experienced sim players might already be adept with the 𝐿𝐵𝐵 and what that means for visual, radio and radar communication, or how sonar works in relation to the thermal layer and how best to use that to your advantage. But for those just starting out, there is a serious lack of beneficial tutorials available. It would appear that the devs have paid in order to have some tutorial videos made, and whilst they appear to be extensive, I actually found them to be quite slow, at times quite boring, and often lacking key strategic educational prompts.
Torpedo in the water! Torpedo in the water! Bearing 17, surface. Contact detected.
So if I could just take a moment to ask you, what do you think of the gameplay that you're watching so far? Looks pretty realistic, action-packed maybe, with some pretty decent graphics and animations, right? At least I hope that is what you thought, because that is genuine gameplay footage. Please do let me know in the comments at the end of the review your thoughts on this title, and especially what I'm about to say. Fundamentally, this is the difference between a promoter and a reviewer. I don't edit my gameplay to exclude the boring bits, hide the bugs, or ignore the limitations. I, like you, have watched numerous gameplay videos before the game released, and they did an excellent job of promoting the game, but they sure as hell didn't give a true representation of what the gameplay is actually like. The gameplay you are watching right now took me 4.5 hours to record, and that only captures half of that battle. So be aware, often the gameplay is very slow, as naval combat often is. There are lots of calculations and plans being drawn up whilst trying to gather strategic information about your enemies. It isn't all explosions and combat. However, the biggest issue right now with Sea Power is the fact that it is very buggy and it has limited functionality. And the problem is, if nobody is highlighting this to the developer, these things might never get fixed. So let's explain some of the problems. The first problem is the lack of any integrated tutorials, as I mentioned. The video tutorials that are available are okay, but some scenarios that introduce the weapons and systems individually, accompanied with some info about when and how to use specific tactical approaches, would, in my humble opinion, be far more a useful tool, especially for new players. There's a lot of technical simulation at play here for weapons communications, and it requires knowledge in order to be able to use it effectively. So the lack of any decent interactive tutorials means that most average players are going to be playing blind. Even experienced players can and do be mistaken or are unaware of an important factor or real-world limitation, and as such they struggle to achieve the desired results. There is a PDF manual that comes with the game as well, but a lot of that is to be included, so there's lots of gaps, and to be honest with you, it's not quite as extensive as I would like it to be. The second problem is when you're starting a scenario, for example. All of your units have preset variables which are defined by the mission creator. So if you wanted to remain stealthy, but there's a single unit within a formation that's in full scan mode, then you're instantly giving away your position to the enemy. And once you have given away your position, it is done. It would be better, in my humble opinion, to give us a pre-start setup option for this purpose. That way we could set up every formation the way we want it, and perhaps even position it where we would like it within a certain area on the map. Because there are so many moving parts in any given scenario, you will do most of your calculations, decision making and commands whilst looking at the tactical map. Unfortunately, there is a logic bug which often makes it impossible to click on certain areas of the map. If, for example, they have already got specific mission info on the map, you can't click on it, or another unit or some other layer which is there blocking your ability to click and add, for example, a waypoint or attack an enemy. Now obviously this is quite frustrating, but worse than that, it can actually lose you a battle that you have spent many hours fighting. Especially when you factor in that sometimes the selected unit doesn't initiate correctly and you'll accidentally redirect a previous unit instead. So if you've just spent 5 to 10 minutes creating a complex route for that previous unit to follow, it's even more infuriating when you completely undo that in one single click. Furthermore, I would like at least the option when I double click on a formation or a unit within a formation that the map focuses in on them as well, because at the moment there's an awful lot of scrolling in, scrolling out, dragging, clicking, dragging, scrolling out, re-dragging, just in order to get the right visuals to be able to do the right thing at the right time. One of the best suggestions I can give to the dev is to allow us to pop all of these screens out. There are, in the top left, you normally have your formation settings, so you can see what formations you have and each individual unit within a formation. That's great. Down in the bottom left, you tend to have your map and your information down there. That's essential. And also, there's an option for updates to be passed to you directly. So any new target that is discovered will pop up, or any target that loses signal will you'll be alerted to. You can turn that on or off in the settings. But unfortunately, when you double click on them, quite often it doesn't take you to the correct location or the ship that discovered them. So it's a bit broken like that. The UI interface just doesn't really work very well. It would be so much better if we could take those extra windows and pop them out into extra screens. I would love to have that map fully opened on a second screen. I would love to have radar communications coming in on another screen, taking up maybe half the screen, and then the other side could be the formation list. That would help so much, because you can see so much more and you can do so much more so much quicker. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of moving parts in this game. Perhaps on this occasion you have 10 ships, 2 subs, 20 aircraft under your command, and let's not forget that some of those ships have helicopters on board as well. It gets busy. So you will be glad of the ability to place selected units into formations. Now, I've mentioned formations already, but what I didn't discuss were the bugs encountered with formations. Unfortunately, one of the bugs means that commands you issue to a formation are not always necessarily going to be adhered to by all of the members in the formation. So when the vampires arrive, some of your ships won't necessarily be locked on or fire to defend themselves, which can cause some problems. Equally, if you want everyone to go MCON, I think it's called, where you're not transmitting but you're listening and you're trying to detect enemies that way, you could have one ship that's not doing the same thing. So whilst you're trying to sneak up on the inside of the coast, they're just constantly pinging away and just letting the enemy know exactly where you are. That's quite a big problem in the game. Possibly though, the worst bug of all is the AI assistant bug. Sometimes the AI assistant, because the game does self-govern itself a lot of the time, will override your commands. Either it will switch, let's say you set a formation and every unit in that formation to fire at will, well, the AI might decide it doesn't want to do that and swap it back to another setting without letting you know that it's done it. One simple example I can share with you is I know from experience that firing a double salvo at an incoming chopper has a much better chance of blowing it up, because that chopper will almost certainly drop flares, and 2 missiles have a much better chance of hitting him than one missile will. But the game AI overruled me repeatedly, wasted 10 missiles, firing each one of them at one at a time, eventually killing him, but taking a really long time, taking that particular ship out of formation, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get him to go back into formation. Another little bug there. But yeah, that was a waste of missiles and a waste of time, and it really caused me a big problem. There are numerous other bugs that I discover, and the more I play, the more bugs I find. And do factor in that these missions I'm playing are on the hardest difficulty setting, so they can and are brutally hard. One mistake is all it takes and you are in big trouble. Another example is when I sent my 3 formation B-52s back to refuel and rearm with anti-ship weaponry, but unfortunately only one of the 3 aircraft properly assigned themselves to the formation, and as a result I couldn't get all 3 aircraft flying together, and I had to waste a lot of time trying to create a waypoint that they all met up at and then try and move them as a formation, only to have them break up and split up into 3 individual units again. And the worst problem about that was that only one of the 3 aircraft had actually taken the correct loadout. So it took hours, not minutes, but hours to fly back to base, rearm and refuel them. And when we got to the point where we were in range of attacking the unit, only one of the 3 aircraft was loaded correctly, and that took me from 24 missiles to 8, which wasn't enough to take out the aircraft carrier that I had targeted. Totally demoralizing bugs. Add to this the limitations of the game. You cannot pick up crew who have abandoned the ship. I think it would be nice if you could pick them up and maybe have them as extra men for firefighting duty or something like that. If you don't have a fixed solution on a target, you cannot hit it. So an example is I could see some shots coming from behind fuel tanks on shore, but I couldn't get a signature on it because my helicopter had been shot down. Now in real life you'd be able to force fire with your guns and attempt to silence that cannon, but that's just not in the game right now. Thankfully, if you get close enough to shore, their angle of fire is reduced and they can't hit you anymore, but then the same applies to you. Equally, if I launch a helicopter from ship B and ship B gets sunk, why then can't I land my stricken helicopter on the shore before it runs out of fuel? Or better still, land it on another ship with a helipad, because the fact is, the other helicopter which is on ship A, for example, will be stored within the ship, so the helipad is free, right? I think the biggest limitation right now that would make a biggest difference is when holding the shift button and creating a route. Right now you cannot currently right click on a joint within that route and add changes to the radio or weapon stance. This simple change could dramatically improve the entire experience, I think. Now forgive me, I don't normally do this, but please do leave me a comment about the game, your thoughts on it, ideas, hopes and aspirations for its future. I believe in time all of these issues that I mentioned today will be fixed, and hopefully the dev will consider introducing my suggestions to improve the gameplay, and that the campaign, when it releases, will be deep, realistic and fully fleshed out. But please remember, my allegiance is to you, the buyer, and although I love, respect and do promote MicroProse effortlessly, I never edit my gameplay to hide bugs, beef up boring gameplay moments or disguise limitations, because at the end of the day, it's you that wants to know what the game is really like before you invest your money in it. Thanks for watching, please hit the like button, subscribe if you'd like to see more.